Hi, I'm Tom Doyle, Associate Professor of Justice and Interim Director of the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society here at Community College of Philadelphia. Welcome to our Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. In this episode, Adjunct Professor David Travaskis interviews Sharon Browning. Ms. Browning is a longtime legal services lawyer who runs Just Listening, a unique program that helps the voices of the poor be heard. Please enjoy what I'm sure you will find to be a very interesting and informative conversation.
Welcome to the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society's Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of Community College of Philadelphia. I'm David Travaskis, Adjunct Professor in the Paralegal Studies program. Today it is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest, Sharon Browning. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, David.
And Sharon, you're a longtime public interest lawyer who has actually moved in recent years to a very interesting area of practice, I guess, for a lawyer. You're involved in a project which is called Just Listening.
Correct.
What does that mean?
Well, it's a double meaning on the just. It's listening as an act of justice. So it's not just listening, it's actually quite an active process. And the premise is that we don't hear each other, we don't understand what the other person is saying because we are listening through a series of filters that are unconscious and not known to us. We don't recognize what they are. And so consequently, we're not hearing each other. And also with the fast pace of the culture, we're not taking the time to listen. So this is listening as an act of justice. And I train people to do that. I try to practice it myself. And it's kind of a little social enterprise to promote the common good.
Well, it's interesting because it comes out of your background, which really is a long-time service going back into the 70s in public interest. And can you just share with the audience how you came to where you are today?
Sure. Actually, this is why it is so much fun for me, is that it really is kind of the culmination of so many different things that I've done in my life, all primarily focused on working with people on the social margins in some way or another. As a lawyer, I've taught a bit about all of this, and I guess I just came to really see in a big way that we're not listening to each other. We're not listening to clients. We're not listening to colleagues. We're not listening to coworkers. We're not listening to family members. And it struck me, one of the things that was really significant was noticing that despite all of the efforts to eliminate poverty, all of the programs, the millions, perhaps even billions of dollars that have been spent on trying to eliminate poverty, it's the numbers of people living in poverty are higher than ever. And what we seem to have done is institutionalized services without really addressing root causes and getting at that and really eliminating it. So it struck me that the people who might have the most to say about that and the most creative ideas were the people who were the recipients of those services and the people who were themselves poor and on the margins. Just Listening is premised upon the idea that we all hold within ourselves the solutions to our own problems. I mean, let me ask you, David, do you like anybody to tell you what to do?
I'm not real good at that.
No, most of us are not, right? We just really don't like to be told what to do. I certainly don't. And so often our response to people on the edges is, well, here's what you should do, you ought to do, we're going to make you do this, and so this whole process of just listening is designed to really get our egos out of the way, whoever the listener is, get our egos out of the way, pay attention to sociocultural filters that are so unconscious in us, and we all have them, as well as the contents of our own minds, which is a lot of scatter in there, even though we're listening to each other, we have an internal monologue. So it's to train people and to practice listening, aware of that and get that all out of the way so that all you do is help someone unpack their story, their experience, mine their own insights and perspective on it. and come to some idea about what they would like to do about it. You can facilitate, you can give information, offer resources, but essentially it is that person's process. And this is true not only of people on the edges, it's true of all of us, which is why it's great fun to do this.
Well, now you said this was the culmination of your work, and
Right.
you had been doing both teaching about and doing direct services to the
Right.
poor.
Right.
Was there a particular instance that caused you to have this revelation that we weren't listening, or was it something that evolved?
Well, it really did evolve. I mean, I suppose in a professional way. I was running an organization heavily involved in the delivery of pro bono legal services in Philadelphia. And as this awareness grew in me, I was trying to kind of change programs and insert some of this into programs. And it just, it couldn't really be done within the structure of that organization without a lot of upheaval and really kind of diverting the organization from its main purpose. It just wouldn't have worked. So, and then, just on a kind of personal level, since you asked, I'll tell you that there was a highly personal event, and that was that my only sister died. Very young, she just died. And I had this revelation. My husband died young, my sister died young. I thought, you know what? Life is short. Do what you love and what is essential, and do it now. And so I just kind of surveyed, like, what is essential in my life right now? What service can I offer? How can I be of use in the world? And this popped up pretty strongly and clearly, and so I managed it and went into a little bit of debt to accomplish it, and here we are.
Well, now, I'm sure people listening are wondering, what does it mean that we're going to have you and do just listening? So are there some stories you can tell us that demonstrate what's the difference between what happens when we are really justice listening and the other kinds of listening we do in our day-to-day life?
Oh, I have so many stories. I suppose I could tell maybe a story from like how it changed someone's personal trajectory. I also think it has some great relevance in terms of policy, social policy, and the things that people on the edges say about what's important and what they would do if they were running the world. And then just kind of in terms of working with colleagues and staffers and family members. I have so many stories at this point, it's great. But let me tell you one. On the personal level, this was a gentleman who had lived on the streets, actually in abandoned houses for about 20 years. And he'd been seen at a free clinic for many, many years, and they were certainly aware of his disability. He had some kind of mental illness, undiagnosed mental illness, and they encouraged him to go get help and whatnot. Well, it's a long story, but in the short story is that over the course of a couple of weeks, he was in the clinic and a listener there listened to him. And we now have a little cadre of listeners, which is great. And he was listened to, and he started to unpack his story and talk about his life and when it had been stable. And not coincidentally, 20 years before that, his mother had died. And she had held on to him. You know, there's so many folks like this on the edges where the moms hold on to them, and then the moms die and they're lost. They just don't know what to do. So not coincidentally, 20 years before his mom had died, and he was untethered and just roaming and not self-aware, not reflective, as most of us are not. In the course of this being listened to, he unpacked his story. And he said to the nurse practitioner in the clinic when he was seen, he said, you know, I just realized that my mother loved me. And then there was a pause, and he said, I think I need to see a doctor. I think I need to go to a hospital. And he did. He went, he got diagnosed. He's now treated. He's in treatment. He's off of the streets. He's living in a group home, I believe. There was another guy who was homeless for 7 years, and just in this process decided what I need is an ID, which, as we know, is key. You can't get any services without an ID. And so in this process, and that one took a while longer, that one took about 7 months, he said, you know, I need an ID. And it came from him. Now, mind you, all of the folks working with this man for so many years
had told him you need an ID.
I told them you need an ID.
Okay.
But somehow it like surfaced in him. It was like, oh, I need an ID. And then we could resource him to how he could get one for free and get it paid for, et cetera. So those are some, just in terms of some folks on the edges. There are also things that people say that have tremendous implications for social policy. You know, there's one woman who, I always ask people if I have permission to tell their stories and if what they want me to call them, can I use their real name, whatever. This woman is sharp as a tack and not coincidentally said she wanted to be called Fannie Mae. It was in the middle of the Fannie Mae crisis, meltdown. She wanted to be called Fannie Mae. And she talks about money. Now, this is a woman who gets about $600 and something a month as her income. Almost every month, she buys tokens to give to a local, it's St. Francis Inn up in Kensington, to give out to people who need them. For doctors.
She's getting $620 a month and she's giving charity.
Yes.
Wow.
And is so happy to do it. She feels that she's received so much. And I say to her, so at the end of the month, you don't have anything. She says, oh, I always get what I need. And she has this idea of money as an energy. You know, it flows from person to person. If I need it, you'll give it to me. If I have it, I give it to you, which is not uncommon. In a lot of communities, that's how money gets moved around. There's a whole underground economy. Just this incredible sense of generosity. So I, at the time, was sitting on a board who was considering an endowment. So I said to her, so what do you think about this endowment? She said, when the need is so great now. She said, why would you put money into banks and tie it up, all that money, and then just dribble out a little bit for people when the need is so great now? If people were serious about solving these issues, think of all that money in the banks freed to address the issue. Now, I get fiscal responsibility. I get the need to, save for the dark times. But there is something about that spirit of generosity and energy of money flowing freely through communities, and I just think she's onto something. I do.
It's interesting, though, because it flies so in the face of what everyone else is saying they should be doing. When you share these kinds of gems that come out of the listening, how do policy people respond? How did your board respond to that idea?
My board was kind and generous. They're just a wonderful group of people. They recognized that this was a little outside their purview and that they could not engage this. So what I'm doing is, one person at a time, just a little chip away.
What's your answer to the people who say we don't have time to spend 7 months listening to somebody? There's so many people in need.
I think all we have is time. All we have is time. The only thing we really have any control over is this minute, this moment. 5 minutes from now, who knows what's going to happen to us? We just don't know, right? So the only thing that I feel we control is this moment and what we can observe and experience and put into this moment. So all of the frenzy of society as we know it now, no one has time for anything. Time is the thing everybody complains most about. I think that's an illusion. And I think we actually do control our time. We're just not conscious about it. We are a rather reactive society. We're not reflective. And actually, that's there are studies on this that people spend 96 to 99% of their time in their middle brains, in their limbic systems, and no one's home there. We're on autopilot. We're just being reactive. Something happens, we react. When the tremendous gift of our humanity and the way that we're built as people is our neocortex, our ability to reflect, to engage our imaginations, to be curious, to want to know more, to really be reflective. So I see this work as an invitation to people to not be so reactive and become much more deeply reflective. It's actually a form of mindfulness practice to just say, here I am in this moment. Let me listen to you. Let me get all my stuff out of the way, just be open and help you unpack your experience and be curious about it, not judge it. Parker Palmer has some kind of rules of engagement for this kind of thing, and I just love them. And so the rules are no fixing, no saving, no changing, no setting straight, no giving an opinion, no judging. You just here you are. And if someone says something you get reactive to, you don't say, oh, you're a jerk. Why would you say that? You say, that's interesting. Why do you think that? What in your experience has led you to that perspective? And I have to tell you, even though I teach people this stuff in a professional context, I've had people say to me that it really altered their personal lives, their relationships with adult children, their relationships with a great uncle who lives in a distant country. They say, like this person really bugged me and I had a terrible time with this person, and all of a sudden I'm practicing this and there's peacefulness in the relationship and a much better sense of an understanding, a true understanding of where the other person is coming from.
Now, I'm sure people who are at home listening to us are thinking, oh yeah, she's got to be some kind of guru who's done this. How do you get to this point where you can listen to people?
Practice. It's all practice. It's all practice. It's not magic and it's not special. There's nothing special about this.
Anybody watching at home could do this.
Of course. We have ears. We have good hearts. I mean, that's the thing. We want to do this. We want to understand each other. We even say that, help me understand. You hear people using the language, right? Help me understand. Or you hear them practicing listening skills. So what I hear you saying. So do I have this right? The problem is that very often the answer to that is no. No, you didn't get that right. That isn't what I said. That isn't what I meant. And the reason that we have that gap is, there are multiple filters through which we hear. In the training that I do, I just focus on 3. The contents of our own minds, our sociocultural biases, prejudices, assumptions, which often are unknown to us. And ego, those unconscious manifestations of ego. We're not even thinking about them. But that expression, a consciousness raised cannot be lowered. So once you become aware of these things, then it's a choice. You make a choice. Am I going to communicate in this way or am I going to communicate in this way? But it's practice, practice, practice.
Well, and you're training people to do this. So let's take a situation from your former life when you were doing direct services to the poor. And I'm a person who's interviewing somebody who's coming in off the street. You said there were 3 things I needed to be watching in my conversation. Can you take me through each of them and maybe use some of your other stories to help the people at home understand this?
Well, okay. Well, here's one. So one of the major distractors for us, like right now, if I asked you, said, David, okay, what are the other conversations in your head?
And I'm thinking about our time. I'm thinking about how the show's going to be perceived. I wonder about what we'll edit. There's a lot of things going on in my head.
Sure. So we're having a conversation. You're listening to me, but there are all of these things, and they tend to be things like the to-do list. What am I going to do next?
Well, and there's a little pressure because I'm talking to somebody who's an expert in listening. And I want to make sure that I'm doing it right.
But I'm not, David. That's the great news. I'm just a student. I'm just practicing all the time. That's all.
So I need to be practicing too.
Well, the good thing is you never get this. I mean, this takes the pressure off. This is not a self-improvement or perfection goal. It's about practicing. And so it takes the pressure off because this is something we're going to have to work at our entire lives. It's not anything we will achieve. It's not anything we will be the expert or the best at, because there's your ego, right? If you say, oh, well, I do this really well, you've lost it. Like, that's just not the point. The point is we have to be aware in every conversation, every time we sit down and engage the humanity of another person, we need to be present to that.
It's not all about me.
It's not at all about me. So there's that. But on the contents of our own minds, and here's a story I will never, this was so formative for me. This is when I first started doing this work about 7 years ago. And there's a gentleman who has schizophrenia. And one of the characteristics of some people with schizophrenia is what they call word salad. The sentences are disjointed and they don't necessarily follow logic and they don't make a lot of sense. And it's very difficult sometimes to have a conversation with someone. And yet here is this gentleman who loves to be listened to. He does. He just loves to engage. He wants to be in relationships. So this one day I'm talking to him and my internal monologue, and I'm not proud of this, but my internal monologue starts going, this is going nowhere. who else is there interesting to talk to? Like, we do this all the time, right? Like, there's a better use of my time than listening to this, right? I'm not proud, but that's where my internal conversation was going. And this man stopped, and this is a true story, I swear this is true. He stopped right in the middle, mid whatever, and he looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "You will never know the wisdom I hold." And then he went off again. And I was practically on the sidewalk. I could not believe it. And you know, one of the theories of schizophrenia is that they're hyper alert, they're hyper aware. Folks with that illness are so aware of what's going on, and it is really clear to me that he knew. He knew very clearly what my brain was doing, what scatter I had. And there was that breakthrough moment where he said that, and I consider it a great gift to this work. We have not had a moment like that since, in the 7 years since, but I never move away until he's ready. And there is always wisdom there in some dimension. It was such a gift. So that's one, the scatter is the other. Sociocultural filters, we hear through who we are, and that's, you know, gender, age, ethnicity, racial components, our sexual orientation. I mean, there are all of these filters through which we hear and interact. Nonverbal communication is very culture-based and power-based. So for example, suppose you were my boss, David, and I'm having a conversation with you and you're talking to me and I'm like nodding at you. Like, what do you think I mean?
Well, if you're nodding, I would hope that you're agreeing with what I'm saying.
Right.
You're taking it in, you're listening.
Right. But if you're my boss and you control my paycheck and you're a man and I'm a woman, my nodding only means I'm getting by here. I know what's required of me. You're talking to me, I have to smile and be nice. I could be thinking that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard.
Well, and I think we all have done that to our bosses.
But I'm not going to tell you that,
Right.
right? Because of the power dynamic. Same thing with, you know, looking people in the eye. Culturally, in some for some folks, that's a sign of great disrespect. Great disrespect. So if you have, for example, a judge who has an unrepresented litigant in front of her or him, and the unrepresented litigant is not looking the judge in the eye, and the judge's coding for that is, you look me in the eye, it's a sign of honesty. That's credibility. I believe you if you look me in the eye, but the client's not or the person's not doing that. The judge can think, no credibility. This person's lying.
Right.
When in
we teach
fact,
young people to look you in the eye, shake your hand
Absolutely.
firmly, and those are very American values.
That's how I was raised. How to evaluate somebody's credibility? Look in the eye, firm handshake. Well, and I've said this to people, have you ever met a predator? Predators look you straight in the, some of them. It's a learned behavior, how to get over, how to win confidence. It's known. So what I do is help people look at their sociocultural filters, or at least the possibility of that. I suggest that people go on to that Project Implicit website and take little bias tests, because
what
we're
is
all
that?
biased. Project Implicit is a joint study, research of, and it's 4 universities who I can't remember. I know Harvard and Yale. I think University of Virginia and some others are involved. You can go to the website and give them the credit they're due.
So you just Google Project Implicit.
Yeah, and you'll get to it. And what it does is measure implicit bias. So there are many, many tests. They're little 10-minute tests that you take and you put with a keyboard, you know, one finger on the I, one on the E, and you answer questions. And it measures the degree to which you have implicit bias on any of this whole range of topics, you know, religion, you know, faith stuff, sexual orientation, gender, ethnicity, all of these things. And it's not you're biased or you're not, it's a range, which of course is how we are, right? Like none of us is bias-free. We'd like to think we are, but we're not. So it just gives you a sense of where you are on this, and it's really, really great. So we're not, the ethical thing to do is to educate ourselves about our own cultural bias and gender bias and all of that to the degree that we can. We must do that ethically. But having said that, we're not ever going to know it all. And that's as important, is to know we don't know. And that our assumptions about how we are and how we're interacting are our assumptions and not rooted in any reality other than our own.
So is there a way to test that? Is there a way to do it better?
The way to do it is just to be present. So David, if we're sitting here and I'm listening to you, would you know that you had my full attention, that I was listening to you wholeheartedly without all of this stuff in the way, if I wasn't nodding and looking straight? Would you know?
I wouldn't know, and what you're suggesting is I don't know that just because you are doing that.
I'm just saying practice it. And I can tell you, for most people, it's not that we don't want feedback, because we do. And this process is a feedback process. It's not only listening. There's actually a whole questioning component called strategic questioning. I teach people, it's actually Fran Peavy's strategic questioning methodology. So how do you ask people questions about them, help them unpack their experience without you messing it up, without you having an agenda, right? So it's not only that, but it's a very fruitful way of engaging someone. And I can tell you that most people know they have your full attention without all the head nodding and all of that. Just being really attentive and attuned and present and focused is enough.
That's fascinating. Now, we don't have a lot of more time, but I'd love to hear a few more of these stories. You have all these stories to share where the just listening made differences in people's lives. And I'm also very curious if you can share with us what impact this is having on policy. Are some of our politicians just listening?
I actually think our politicians could benefit from the technique.
I'm sure people at home have a whole lot of people they want you to go teach.
I think, it's highly individual. I mean, I could tell you stories that I'm aware. I think there are also probably many more stories of which I am not aware. I do, there was one of my favorite ones was a judge actually who went through this training.
So you've trained judges, you've trained people in power. So people are
not
getting
many.
Not many, but some are getting it.
Not many in power, no. Although, to the extent that we all have power, maybe I take that back, because we have the power of our own person in every conversation and with everyone we meet, right? That's a pretty powerful thing. We never know. We never know what impact we're having on another. So I work with a lot of people in power. How's that? Yeah. But this judge, anyway, and you can get people's body language, and he's like sitting there, like bored. And in the midst of one of these little listening exercises, all of a sudden he sort of raises himself up out of his seat. He goes, wait. And now, mind you, everybody's in groups talking, right? He goes, wait, everybody, wait. I just realized something. I never listened to anyone.
That's what the judge said.
That's what the judge said. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's
wow.
What the judge, I never listened to anyone. Yeah.
And did he start listening to anyone?
I hope so.
But at least he had the revelation. I guess you have to start somewhere.
Sure. It's all just becoming conscious, right? We're all trying to wake up and stop sleepwalking.
That's amazing. Now, can people find you on the web, Sharon?
Sure. Yeah, if you just do just listening.
Just JUST listening.
Listening. Yeah, maybe put Philadelphia on there, but they should find me.
And this has been wonderful. It's been
well,
so great to actually listen and to talk with you. That's all the time we have for today. And I do want to thank my guest, Sharon Browning, for joining us.
Thanks, David. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank all of you for tuning in. You've been watching the Fox Rothschild Center for Law and Society's Perspective series on CCP TV, the educational channel of the Community College of Philadelphia. I'm David Travaskis, adjunct professor in the Paralegal Studies program. For more information, contact us here at the college. And we'll see you next time on CCP TV.